With spectacular displays and fond memories, BBC1 now celebrates 50 years of the Farnborough Airshow.
Welcome to this special air show from Farnborough, where I'm flying in the Longbow Apache, perhaps one of the world's most lethal weapons platforms. It's the British Army's next generation of multi-role attack helicopters, and this is a very special ride. It's the first time outside America that television has been on board. I'll be putting it through its paces in just a moment, and we'll also be putting the spotlight on the EF-2000 Eurofighter, or Typhoon as it's called now, to see if it really is as good as it's cracked up to be. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
50 years ago, when this aircraft, the de Havilland Vampire, flew into Farnborough, it made an impact comparable to that of Eurofighter today. Indeed, even more so, because the Vampire had already been in RAF squadron service for 2 years, and it was an enormous success. So what a splendid moment now as we approach the historic black strip of runway at Farnborough to participate in what is so much more than just another air show.
Brace yourself. You're up. Come out.
Despite the gloomy global economic outlook, this is a time of huge aerospace success for the UK, which has now overtaken France as Europe's largest aerospace power. But how long will it continue? Next year could see a merger between all the continent's major aircraft manufacturers, and there will be winners and losers. 50 years on, and Farnborough's still as exciting as ever.
There's surely no better way to start the action for our millions of viewers at home and on BBC World than with Anatoly Kvocha, hero of Russia, and the stunning Su-27. With the two Saturn Lyulka engines producing over 50,000 pounds of thrust, this heavy all-metal aircraft can pull some astonishing manoeuvres, not least the tail slide. But perhaps the Cobra is his pièce de résistance. The flight control system limits the aircraft to an angle of attack of 30 to 35 degrees. So for this, Anatoly has to override the computers and fly it manually. An angle of attack more like 100 or 110 degrees there. The real trademark of the big Russian fighters. I think a well done is in order just for being here at all. With all the financial and political upheaval at home, they've had a real nightmare just getting here. And indeed the Su-37 that had been planning to come in the end didn't. This one, the Su-27, has a useful feature. If it all goes horribly wrong, there's a panic button, and the aircraft will right itself to fly straight and level. When you see the Sukhoi's baby stablemate, you might think that would be a useful optional extra. Frenchman Xavier de Lapparent has had this Su-26 specially modified to make it lighter with a supercharged engine, producing over 400 horsepower, and a huge 2.7 metre diameter propeller. That all means a massive power to weight ratio, which enables him to fly the whole display below 100 knots with some quite ridiculous antics. And one of those is this one, where he literally makes like a helicopter just hanging in the sky. Having been world aerobatic champion at 24, Xavier now concentrates on developing his unique display flying. But now from the stomach churning we go to the sleek and elegant. Concorde, 28 years after its Farnborough debut, still the most magical of airliners. Raymond Baxter, commentator then, an honoured passenger now.
Not only on board Concorde, Julian, but also sitting alongside the man who was chief test pilot for the British half of the project, Brian Trubshaw. Trubby, this is a far cry from those anxious times 25 years ago and more.
Well, yes, that's quite true. They were a little bit anxious to begin with because obviously we weren't quite as assured about the aeroplane as we are now. And we'd also had quite a lot of frustrations the last few days before we flew. So it came as a great sigh of relief when we eventually lifted off on our first flight.
What about when you showed Concorde to the Farnborough crowd for the first time? Was that exciting or just routine?
Well, it wasn't routine because we had a problem with the weather back at Fairford, because it was only a flypast that we did, and I knew that the chances of getting back to Fairford were very, very remote. Had a go at getting it back to Fairford, but the radar people couldn't get me down, so I diverted to Heathrow. And of course that caused a hell of a stir because all the noise complaints galore came out.
After a flight like that, there was only one place to go, the President's Suite, of course, for lunch, a grandstand view of the flying and the chance to catch up with old friends, among them John Cunningham and Peter Twiss. As chief test pilot on the Comet, John Cunningham became the world's first certificated passenger jet captain.
The Comet was the first aeroplane that combined the wonderful comfort and smoothness of flying in a jet. And those of us that had flown military jets before were well aware that if only that comfort could be built into a passenger aeroplane, that the first time passengers experienced that, they would be completely taken as that is the way I want to go in the future. And that's fortunately what happened.
And that future, the legacy of much of John's pioneering work on jet airliners, is a growing range of aircraft from Europe's Airbus industry. Airbus's view of Farnborough has been bright, despite the storm clouds of global economic recession. Airbus came to Farnborough with a new aircraft, the A318, and orders worth more than $9 billion. So it's not surprising that this A330 display is more than just a little triumphal. It first flew in November 1992 and entered airline service with Air Ontaire in January 1994. It was designed to fly over 7,000 miles on just 2 engines. But what engines? This one features the Rolls-Royce Trent 700s. Each engine generates an enormous 72,000 pounds of thrust. That's nearly 3 times the total of John Cunningham's Comet. By the time the next Farnborough comes around, Airbus will be a completely different company. And work will also have begun on the double-decker A3XX, which will have room for up to 550 passengers.
Would it be Roy Valk? For Army pilots, it was a big decision. Or perhaps the Tiger. Army pilots are about to get a new attack helicopter. Super Cobra, maybe. It's a whole new ball game. Remember Cressy, Poitiers, Agincourt. It's the Longbow Apache.
The really clever part of the new Apache is the Longbow mast-mounted radar. This allows the pilot to hover out of sight of the enemy, just the radome showing, and that can detect, classify and prioritise the enemy targets and pass the information to the fire and forget missiles. It's the first time the Longbow Apache has flown at Farnborough, and I'm thrilled to say I'm flying it. Clarkson does cars, I do planes. This AH-64D is the US Army model. The British Army model, which will be built under license by Westland Helicopters and is due in service in about 2 years' time, will have various improvements, notably the engines, which are going to be Rolls-Royce Turbomeca 322 with a considerably enhanced output, and also a Marconi defence suite. Now, we're flying a practice anti-tank mission with Boeing test pilot Gary Lettrick. Gary, just talk us through what we're doing here.
This is a typical U.S. military type of mission where we're flying at low altitude en route to a battle position. Once we've acquired the target, we'll lock onto it with our targeting systems, and we will use our Hellfire anti-tank missiles in order to make pinpoint distribution of our ordnance.
Okay, so we can get down now into a fire position.
A typical scenario would be to move into a battle position such as this behind a barrier of some kind, which is this tree line immediately to the front of the aircraft. Then we unmask the aircraft or the systems just enough that so we can see the target area. The radar will scan, and as it scans, it'll pick up targets. We descend back down below the barriers, and we can take a look at that, all that target data that we have there, and we can decide which one of those targets we want to shoot, or which one of those targets we want to hand off to our other team members and let them shoot. And we can send those targets to our other team members and assign them fire zones, or we can send those off to maybe an AWACS who could forward those further on back to headquarters, and we could use this in a reconnaissance mode. This is kind of a picture of the battlefield to our front, a radar picture.
Can I take control?
Yes, you are a helicopter pilot, is that correct? Yep.
I was a legs pilot.
You have the controls.
I have control.
You have the controls.
I must say, it handles very nicely, isn't it?
It's very crisp for a big, heavy helicopter.
Yeah. Throw it around quite well. And the radome on top doesn't have any effect on its handling, maneuverability?
No, it doesn't. In fact, it's hardly even noticeable over an A model. The A model, of course, has nothing at all.
Can I take it back in?
Yes, you can.
Absolutely bloody marvellous.
In the words of the BAC representative, it's going like a bomb. How quickly the years roll by, in my case rather too many of them. But I remember falling in love with aeroplanes at the age of about 4 at Croydon, which was the equivalent of Heathrow in those days. And then at 13 cycling with my best friend over to Duxford in Cambridgeshire to watch the beautiful biplane fighters. And I resolved then and there that when the war came, as my father assured me it would, that's what I would do. So I did that. But then, since 1950, thanks to radio and television, I've been lucky enough to have a front seat at many of the great moments in British aviation. A highlight of my first Farnborough radio commentary, the world's first passenger jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet. The 1950s were the vintage years of British aviation, and Farnborough was the shop window in which we displayed to the world our outstanding achievements since the war and the birth of the jet age. Television arrived at Farnborough in 1953, and for the first time people saw live pictures of Britain's nuclear deterrent, the V-bombers, Vulcan, Victor and Valiant. The well-dressed crowds flocked to see the new turboprop airliners, the Viscount and Britannia, again the first of their kind in the world. And who amongst us who saw them will ever forget Squadron Leader Roger Tutt leading 22 Hawker Hunters in their world record-breaking loop? Not only have I been lucky enough to watch these great moments, but I've also had the privilege of working with some of the great test pilots of the time, many of whom are friends of mine to this day. Not only that, but several allowed me to fly with them in display.
Already coming up 120, 130, 150 knots. John, that is amazing.
Well, it's all been great fun, of course, but quite hard work, I have to say, and the accommodation seldom the lap of luxury. Vertical ladders are par for the course, and the whole structure can shake quite alarmingly when a fast jet thunders past. The shape and performance of today's fighters epitomize the staggering advance of aviation technology. Oh well, here we go again.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that buying an aircraft is about safety, efficiency and maybe price. But here at Farnborough, it's also about lunch. In these corporate chalets, the wheels of industry are greased with piles of prawns, lashings of lamb and bottle after bottle of fine wine. But who at Farnborough serves the best lunch?
Well, today we have, to begin with, fried foie gras with honey vinegar.
As the main course, we have dos de sang rôti à l'oseille.
Chicken with Thai curry and lamb.
No company can afford to skimp on its catering.
The chef, his name is Yannick Le Gallet, and he's one of the best. Of course, everything comes from France every day. To tell you how good he is, he's flying out tomorrow to New York to cook somewhere else.
It's not necessarily the be-all and end-all because it's the business that's being done that's very important. But it is important as regards making the customer happy, and hopefully he'll sign the contracts.
Flying the flag for Britain is Gordon Brown's chef, Kelvin MacDonald.
And we know we do the best food in Farnborough.
There's no doubt Airbus Industry serves the best lunch.
We think we are the best ones.
Well, as to who offers the best lunch, to be honest, all the companies had great menus. Although word on the street suggests that Snecma took the honours this year. But apparently, if you want the best treatment, you need to be in the market for a bizjet. And the price of your free lunch starts at around £12 million.
Unless you're a winner of the airshow competition. Chris and Sharon Rhodes from Lancashire joined the BBC team here yesterday for a privileged guided tour. Meeting the pilots and taking to the air themselves. Now, you're not too late to enter this week's quiz, but you'll have to be quick. Get it right and you too could be airborne with a trial flying lesson. Here's a reminder of the questions. Question 1, identify this aircraft. Is it A, the Dassault Rafale, B, the Saab JAS-39 Gripen, or C, the Eurofighter Typhoon? Question 2, in 1934, a de Havilland-designed plane won the England to Australia air race. What was that aircraft? Was it A, a DH-87 Hornet Moth, B, a DH-88 Comet, or C, a DH-93 Don? And question 3, this is the 50th anniversary year at the Farnborough site, but in what year was the first SBAC show? 1932, 36 or 38? So your answers please. Call 0891 747 444. You'll be reminded of the questions once again, and all you have to do is leave your answers in the correct order. This is your chance, remember, to take to the air and actually fly a single-engine plane. But lines close at midnight tonight.
Here at Farnborough for the first time is the RAF's version of a new updated Hercules, the C-130J. Its state-of-the-art propellers and lightweight fuselage give it startling performance, and the new computerized flight deck is a quantum leap over its venerable older predecessor. I joined pilot Bob Price and co-pilot Wayne Roberts for a flight in this 21st century version of the Herc.
Number 4242 November, clear takeoff, 210, 12 knots.
Alert for takeoff, 42 November.
Okay, as you see, I'll be adding full power in the airplane. In this airplane, unlike previous Hercs, you don't have to be gentle with the power. You can slam it all the way to max power. Power will come right up to the maximum and stop right there. Brace yourself. I'll be releasing the brakes on 3, 2, 1, release.
Wind check 22010.
Airspeed's alive.
QNH1001.
Right, yo? Hear you. Right, coming off. You're up. Come on.
I'm intrigued by how the aircraft handles, because it's not a small aircraft by any means.
The C-130J is actually quite agile. As you can tell during the takeoff roll, we accelerated quite rapidly, and I was able to rapidly bring the airplane's nose up to an attitude of 20 degrees and climb out in a fairly steep attitude. You're right, for a fairly large aircraft, we are quite agile.
There are several things that make this airplane better than the older C-130s. The new engines with the new propellers provide a lot more thrust, about 25% more thrust and brake release.
But engines aren't the only improvement in the C-130J. There's been a total major change here in the cockpit. You may be forgiven for thinking it's similar to that of a 777, because now it's a state-of-the-art glass flight deck. Pilots of the old Hercules will certainly appreciate the head-up display and advanced avionics. And these high-tech improvements have made it a natural choice for many air forces. It's 20% cheaper to operate than its predecessor, has an increase in range, increased speed, and can carry much larger loads, but no tanks. The RAF's initial order is 25. But high-tech still has its problems.
Check altitude.
Why is she saying that? Any idea?
Because we're 250 high?
No.
Check altitude.
No, we're right on.
I know what it is.
Check altitude.
Ah, just turn it off.
Well, apart from the odd hiccup, my short flight certainly convinced me. The C-130J has been a long time in coming, but the complete renovation of this 1950s design will see the Hercules flying well into the next millennium.
All right, right there. It's nice. Very nice.
This weekend, the public are enjoying a glimpse back into Farnborough's past from the historic aircraft park. Here's the Percival Piston Provost, RAF basic trainer of the mid-50s. Note the side-by-side cockpit. The melodious note of its Alvis Leonides engine accompanies a leisurely takeoff. But like all RAF trainers, the Provost was fully aerobatic, a capability amply demonstrated by John Ferry, the son of Sir Richard, the founder of the great Ferry Aviation Company. And here's an elegant flight of Doves, de Havilland's first post-war production machine, a light passenger carrier and communications aircraft. All these three are in individual private ownership, led by former Minister of the Crown, Lord Trafalgar, and including one owned by King Hussein of Jordan. In all, 542 Doves were built and sold, the majority for export. Again from de Havilland, the Source classic jet flight of Vampires and Venoms, each in a specific livery. The blue one is in the colours of an Admiral's barge, Royal Navy. In April 1946, the Vampire became the Allies' second operational jet after the Meteor. It was the first jet in the world to land on a carrier and to cross the Atlantic Ocean. It broke a whole raft of international records. Another distinctive shape and sound, the Hawker Hunter. And another record breaker, including the then world's airspeed record, Neville Duke, 727.6 miles an hour straight and level, and the Hunter easily went supersonic in a shallow dive.
Turner and Vorning, test pilots. The aircraft, Typhoon. The limit, the sky. In 4 years' time, this will be the young RAF fighter pilot flicking 3 switches to start the aircraft faster than he can strap in. Eurofighter hits Farnborough for the first time with its fighting kit on. For John Turner, the adrenaline is pumping.
This is perhaps the worst moment of the whole of the display as we taxi forward into the holding position waiting for clearance to take off. And the one thing that we do in the cockpit at this stage is try and pretend that the crowd doesn't exist and just concentrate on what we're doing next. Brakes off, straight into reheat, the acceleration is terrific, forcing you back into the seat. Pull the stick back at about 100 knots. This is a high alpha velocity vector roll. It's very difficult to fly. Stick fully back in the stomach, stick full across to roll, and then to stop it, having gyrated around the sky, stick center, and the aircraft stops. We come out of this maneuver by slapping the reheat in and knocking the aircraft straight onto its side to go into a min-radius turn. The reheats light instantaneously and allow us to get terrific performance, again in terms of turn rate now, in front of the crowd. It's interesting, during the maneuver there are a number of times when we pull the stick back rapidly, creating G. Neither Chris Forning nor myself are actually aware of how much G we're using in the display. And the reason for that is that we don't care how much we're using because the aircraft is there to look after it for us.
Typhoon won over many admirers this week. Sadly, though, not the paying public. It was unserviceable yesterday and again today. We'll have more on Typhoon, plus our regular varied dart, when the airshow returns on BBC2 at 8 o'clock on Thursday. Bye-bye.